The Fulham jersey is appropriate. I will tell you that.
I was practically naked, so I just threw this one on. I thought it made the most sense.
Behind the scenes little tease right there, Phil.
That was after I went live. I say something like that.
I know.
Way to go. Way to go.
I got you on tilt already.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, we're late because of me. Sorry, everyone. If anyone's there. You ready, though? You want to get started?
Yeah, we can get started whenever.
Here we go.
If you're just joining us, we're going to be doing an abbreviated version of our main show. It's, that time of year where we're paused for MLS and we've got the other tournament that shall not be named, but will probably end up getting name dropped. Leagues Cup. There you go. Ripping that Band-Aid off. But 45-minute episode tonight or so, something like that. Strap in. We've got a lot of city stuff to talk about, shockingly enough.
And exciting stuff too, for me at least. Here we go. Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. We are presented by Noble Ice Vineyards. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Matt, we've got a lot to talk about. There's a lot of news to talk about and a lot of players to talk about with kind of new ideas being thrown around and being seen in the last couple of games. Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining me, Matt Baker.
Good to be here, Phil Grooms. It is the middle of the transfer window, but it doesn't seem like, I don't know, it seems weird that we haven't been talking about this window. We've just been talking about the complete overhaul of our roster, almost like when will it end type of a thing. And it did not end this week, and it may still not end yet. I think we still have at least one more position that is being looked at right now, whether or not City can or even is able to make another move right now. The roster itself is full, but holy cow, did we have some seismic changes to it this week.
Oh, man. And I know what you're talking about, and I'm blanking what it is. So I'm kind of in anticipation to be
It'll come up. It'll come up in this episode.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, a lot of moving parts, and we thought it was done, and it still hasn't been completed. We haven't used all these players that have come in. And as Matt said, we're going to be teasing some more rumors of more possibilities coming in the near future here, or not. Again, it's a rumor. Let's start with the big one. I would say this is the biggest shocker, I think. Biggest shocker official signing of all of St. Louis City's existence. I don't know if that's true, though. That's a big statement.
It might be the biggest shock since they started play in 2023. I don't think that's as big of a leap. But I will say that I'm a little sad that we don't have our own Santiago Beltran here to talk this one through, because he's been calling this for quite some time. That City made the shock move to send Tim Parker to New England, and they got back a more than serviceable replacement for him, I would say, in Henry Kessler, 27-year-old with U.S. men's national team experience, center back. Neither are eligible for Leagues Cup, so we've got a bit of a wait before we see Kessler. But man, Phil, we actually pulled the trigger on Tim Parker. Now, this was... Santi was joking about it for a while with merit, right? Because this is a move that we knew Tim Parker's contract was up. We knew that it would be a monetary splash for St. Louis City to actually re-sign him to a new contract. This had no options to his contract, so this would have been a fresh contract. And as a refresher, the Tim Parker contract that came to St. Louis City was in the trade with the Houston Dynamo on the expansion draft night, where we sent Gam to Houston. Houston sent us Tim Parker, and they also ate some of his salary. They set a portion, we believe it was in the $400,000 to $500,000 range, which put Tim Parker at that max budget charge. So it was very MLS mechanism-y in how Tim Parker's salary has been being paid for and on the books for St. Louis City. But it boils down to the fact that if we were to have re-signed Tim Parker, we probably would have at least doubled what we were currently paying him from St. Louis's salary allotment. And Lutz Pfannenstiel, in an interview this past weekend with KMOX, was very clear that with 6 months left on the contract, we simply could not find an agreement on the contract terms. So this move to send out, in a lot of ways, the heart and soul of St. Louis City was a foreshadowing, a forethought, right? To not just how we can get value for Tim Parker now, but in bringing Henry Kessler's contract with New England now becomes St. Louis City's contract, because all contracts are with the league. Kessler's under contract until 2025, end of 2025 season, with an option for 2026. So we've got a 27-year-old center back with his own injury history behind him coming into St. Louis to shore up the center back position for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and you kind of hinted at this, but it's interesting that if at some point Lutz realized that there was going to be no value gotten for Tim Parker, rejoining the club, that he needed to make sure there was some kind of value gotten back before leaving the club. And so I thought that was, shrewd business, but it is good business in the end if it's between making money or making no money or getting something back in a player.
Yeah, and that's what it boils down to. It was really frustrating that we couldn't come to an agreement with Tim Parker, one of the absolute fan favorites. And I think this really cuts deep to a lot of not just City fans, but the staff, I think. I mean, Parker's all over the marketing material. He's all over jerseys throughout City Park. I have a Tim Parker jersey. He was the first goal scorer for St. Louis City. Nobody's going to forget that initial goal that he scored in Austin, the celebration announcing the baby. I mean, there was just so much deep-rooted history in such a short period of time. And it's hard to believe that in the grand scheme of things, we're going to look back on this and say Tim Parker was only with St. Louis City for a year and a half. That seems like it's going to be shocking at some point when we look back on this whole thing. But at least we did get something for him, right? This is a hallmark of Lutz in this transfer window is you're not going to let players go for a free. He brings players in on a free. He takes advantage of that, but he makes sure that when you have these contract negotiations, you're looking ahead to say, I'm not willing to let a season play out and lose a guy this valuable on a free transfer or free agency. I'm going to get some value from him. Happened with Sam, happened to Tim Parker. This seems like, and you could extrapolate where we go from here for those of you who have looked at the St. Louis City roster and when contracts are expiring. But I would say that this is probably foreshadowing in other moves that Lutz might be looking to make in this window. Definitely the most valuable asset, I would say, in Tim Parker, available for New England now. So, I think it's a lot to digest now. I will say it's a lot to take in as a City fan, and it's kind of even the insult to injury as Kessler was introduced this week and had his picture. He took his picture by the arch. Everybody saw that. It's kind of weird though that we don't get his services until Portland on the other side of this tournament. But at the end of August, when MLS play resumes, that's his first time eligible because he's already made an appearance in Leagues Cup for New England. So this coming weekend, we won't have Kessler, even though he's here in St. Louis. He's in form. He just is not eligible to play.
Yeah, and let's talk about first. Let's thank you, Tim Parker. Really, I mean, just a great soldier for St. Louis. I know he's played injured on and off because he will we'll get guys healthy and he'll go out for a couple of games, and it just seemed like he was probably pushing through with slight injuries here and there. Obviously, has literally won us games throughout last season. We love him here. I love the way he plays. I mentioned on Twitter that some of my favorite memories are him having to be 1v1 a little bit wide around outside the box, and he will just body a guy. And it is darn, like, the wrong referee will give you a yellow. The right referee in almost every case did not give him even a foul. So I really, really love the way he plays. I love his attitude. He showed a lot of love to St. Louis and endeared the fans immediately to him. So thank you, Tim, for all you did. I know we've had a lot of dark humor about his moving on, but I think he can appreciate that. And I do want to say poor Santi has had to deal with this dark joke that we've had, and I'm officially retiring it, even though it was a really good, fun ride while it lasted.
I think we're all gonna be okay with moving on beyond that. But pour one out for Tim Parker's bucket hat on X, on Twitter, social media, because he's got to find a new shtick, and I'm curious to see what ends up happening there. One other thing on this note, Phil, though, Lutz did go on to say that when he arrived in 2020, Henry Kessler ended up becoming a top talent who plays for New England, started to be involved in the national team, so he was on his list as a guy that he really wanted to get. I'm not sure if St. Louis City has a quota of one or two U.S. national team players at a time, having sent out AZ, now having sent out Parker and getting Kessler in return. Obviously, that's tongue in cheek, so don't quote me on that. But I think it does go one further. So if we're looking at trends of what Lutz has been doing in this transfer window, not just bringing guys in on freeze, not just sending players out whose contracts are expiring, but you also have some really deep-seated interest in guys. Simon Betcher, now Henry Kessler. We're finding out a little bit, pulling back the curtain on what Lutz's big board might have looked like in the past. The players that he scouted a few years ago, he's keeping tabs on them, keeping track of when they become available. So Simon Betcher being the first one, the second one, really, I guess Cedric Teuchert really counts as that too, knowing that he pursued him for at least 7 months. And now you have Henry Kessler, who has been on Lutz's radar for now about 4 years. That's kind of fascinating and really insightful, I think, in how long these scouting these players really goes back to.
Yep, and I've said it many times, as we look at like who's before this long stretch of several players coming in recent weeks, we were wondering, are people ready to come in? Is Lutz going to sign people? Yes, that short list is always there. He's got a long one. I think other general managers would love to cheat and see who's on it, because I think he's got a very quality short list of players that he would like to call in whatever situation erupts, comes out. And so Kessler being on this one, Simon Betcher being on this one, much respect to Lutz, because I also have loved Kessler ever since he kind of emerged and got those minutes with the national team. He's mobile. He's good with both feet. He's a good passer. And he's got that dog in him, right? We saw that stuff he was pulling by grabbing both balls and throwing them into the crowd to kind of gamesmanship his way through a game. So these are all things we like. The one worry, right? He was injured most of last season, and he was injured about a third of the season before that. Seems like soft tissue kind of stuff, Matt. And so I don't know how much of a worry it is. He's a lot younger than Tim Parker. Could be a massive problem. Looking at how Nilsson has been since we've got him, this isn't something that we can just escape without any problems. But if he stays healthy, I will say, if he regains that form he was in 2020, 2021, when Lutz was looking at him, my goodness, I really like Kessler, and he could be a massive player for us for a long, long time.
St. Louis fans might not want to hear this, but he has had hamstring issues. That's the main injury that he's had, including hamstring surgery last year. So hopefully that's behind him, but that's been the biggest thing that's kept him out. So looking at his missed games, looking at his missed minutes, soft tissue, it's hamstring. And this year it seems like that's behind him, resolved. So you just hope that this isn't a re-aggravation scenario possibility. But other than that, I mean, he's a hard-nosed player. Like, all indications from New England, talking to their analysts and their journalists out there, he's a skilled defender. He goes too hard in the box sometimes. He has a penchant for causing some PKs. So he's very aggressive, like you're saying, not just his mindset in his willingness to time waste a little bit. There's some terms we can't really use on the radio here, but I think that's the penchant that he brings to St. Louis. So he's that player that I think a lot of fans are really going to gravitate towards in his actions on the field and the way that he tries to get in the opposition's head. And that's not even talking about some of the stats and the way he might line up with a guy like Kyle Hiebert or Joachim Nilsson, because it's really complimentary. So we're not going to get to see him for a little bit because of that Leagues Cup rule and how he's cup tied basically to New England. But he really fits in well with a Kyle Hiebert or Joachim Nilsson. If you look at his stats, he's really strong in blocking shots, successful take-ons where he's good with the ball at his feet. He can carry the ball well. He can progressively pass the ball very well, long distances, and he's good with pass completion. So he's got good awareness and he's got good vision. And these are things that you need from your center back as they start to drive the ball up the field. We know that St. Louis loves to play the long ball, both from Berkey and from our back line. And this is something that Henry Kessler is pretty good at. And so I look forward to seeing how that vision can complement somebody like a healthy Joachim Nilsson, who's very much quick, very much that last man back, and can win those aerial duels, can clear the ball, provide the interceptions. They could complement each other very well in, you take the ball, you give it to me, and I'll distribute it. I think that offers a lot of promise, whether it's Joachim Nilsson or Kyle Hiebert. Those are the two that are probably going to be partnered with him, pending health, obviously. But I think that's where our center back depth chart is right now, because you have Henry Kessler, you have Joachim Nilsson injured, Kyle Hiebert, Josh Yarrow, Michael Wenzel, and then maybe Jake Girdwood Reich if he wants to play center back, but he's been playing defensive midfielder for reasons we'll touch on in a few minutes. I think this provides a lot of fascinating potential here on the back line, and seeing I see a lot of just ways that we can flow straight from Tim Parker to Henry Kessler. I think it's going to be rather seamless in what we should expect on the other side of this Leagues Cup break when Kessler's available. And so I'm excited that we can maintain that level of quality, at least theoretically, for the next couple of years, and we don't have to worry about losing Parker, signing another center back at the end of the season.
It's been fun to see those charts comparing center backs, our center backs, and their skill levels in different ways. They can be limiting, those charts, but they are also fun to look at and helpful in some ways as well. Matt, is it okay if we move on from here?
Please do.
Okay, great. Well, first, a station call. You're listening to Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS. Thank you for joining us. There is another player that has been signed officially to the team that hasn't gotten minutes, and I was a bit worried, or not worried, sorry. I was curious if he would jump right in the squad, as Hartl and Toykert both have, without much training. It didn't happen in the last game. I think it could have, but no love lost there. Giannis Horn is the player we want to talk about here.
I don't think he's even in St. Louis yet.
Oh, okay. See, I thought he had some training, so that's my mistake.
I have not seen him, and he has not been assigned a number to my knowledge. But I mean, this is another one that St. Louis City fans know of. Was announced defender Giannis Horn is on loan to St. Louis City now from FC Nuremberg through the end of 2025. City has a purchase option for Horn to keep him through June of 2026, as well as the remainder of 2026 with the club option. So on loan now. If we pick up that option for purchase, we'll have Horn through June 2026, and then we have a club option for the rest of 2026. This required us to obtain an international roster slot from the Philadelphia Union, rather discounted roster slot, I would say. So these have typically gone for $150,000 to $200,000 in the past, and we only had to pay $75,000 in next year's general allocation money. So if there's any MLS sickos out there who are trying to track your GAM expenditures, God bless you, because I've tried and it is near impossible. It's a fruitless effort, but $75K from next year's pool of money. I think this is one of those that you just hope sticks, because at this point, Phil, it feels like we are just churning through left backs like it's butter, and I'm ready for something to stick. Giannis Horn is in the long line that goes back to Johnny Nelson, Selmer Pedro. You have Anthony Marcanic still on the roster. You have Jay Reed still on the roster. Kyle Hebert. This is a packed left back room that I think Lutz he has a lot of expectations. And when we first heard the Giannis Horn rumors, the assumption is that this was the central defender that Lutz was eyeing, because he had said, we had heard that there would be a left back and a center back. Now we're kind of in that mode of maybe that player is both. Giannis Horn was a center back for Nuremberg. That's where they slotted him in. That's where we had this idea. But ultimately, it goes to he's going to play left back. That's what Lutz said in the press release. Giannis' versatility will be a good addition. He's an aggressive left back who is good with the ball and is beneficial in the way we play. His ability to also play at center back makes him dynamic and provide flexibility to our back line. So he gives you more depth at center back if you need to. I don't know what scenario you would actually have maybe a Kyle Hebert out left and a Giannis Horn at left center back, but I do know scenarios where Giannis Horn could add some versatility if we decide to run a 3 center back model. That's an exciting proposition for me. What I see with Giannis Horn is some good comparisons. When I look up how he compares to maybe some other MLS left backs, I'm looking at guys like Claudio Bravo from Portland, DeJuan Jones from New England, Nuhu from Seattle, and I'm seeing a lot of similar numbers in some various areas. If you look at per 90 numbers, looking at touches, he's right there with Nuhu. I see a lot of similarities in touches in different areas of the field and how they attack, similar to Nuhu. So if you're seeing how Nuhu plays for Seattle at left back, kind of seems like he'd be similar as far as how his numbers have been matching up. And that's even deflated a little bit based on the fact that he was at center back for a good portion of last year. I think the attacking numbers, the touches in the final third, the touches in the attacking half are all going to rise compared to what you see on places like FB Ref. So exciting potential out here. Not a whole lot of tape on him, but I think the stats that you see on the numbers, they provide a lot of potential and a lot of excitement in how he can complement and probably take a starting role at this point. So this gives you a more confident left back, a more comfortable left back in the two-way style that we play. The best opportunity since Nicholas Dewar that didn't work out. And so you're getting a guy who's not just good at the position, but he has familiarity with a lot of other players on our team. Being another German, playing the youth national team, Nuremberg, Leuven, Hartl, Teukert, he's got experience with all these guys on various levels. And so that's another thing that comes into this, and you're excited to see the really well meshing of each one of these players. I think that's what was missing from a lot of these attempts at left back signings, is how they gel with other players. We heard Totland earlier this year and talk about how well he gelled with some of the attacking players, and Rasmus Alm, Indiana Vassilev, Klaus. That to me is the big thing that's been missing, is you need a left back who plays cohesively with those around him. And I think this provides a whole lot of potential there.
A lot of thoughts about some of the things you said there, it being that, what is he going to look like? And of course, we're not going to know until I think he gets a decent amount of minutes here at City. But, those players you mentioned, him having numbers similar to, that's not what I think of when I think of a center back who also plays left back. I think of someone who looks and plays like Nerwinski, right? So maybe he is more of a left back that has filled in at center back. If he's going to look like DeJuan Jones or Nuhu, who are very, very, very attacking, nimble, passing capable players. So, I'm excited to see that, because I think the center back thing kind of got me a little less excited, right?
Yes.
And so I have a feeling this isn't going to be, think of him as a center back who's playing left back. I think it's going to be more like when we were going way overboard with people saying Totland is going to play left back, even though he's mainly a right back. We totally blew that way out of proportion. Not necessarily us, but I feel like Twitter did, especially because we did mention it from time to time. And then we just started taking it back like crazy because it just got out of control. So let's not overdo it with Horn. Let's wait and see what he looks like. I'm very excited because the pedigree's there. There's some disappointment because I do think Reed is someone I've been extremely excited about. I thought he's looked extremely good since he's come in. Less and less limited role every week. And I imagine that'll get exposed at some point. I think I felt the same way about Marcanic early on. So we'll see how that plays out. But again, the pedigree is there coming from Nuremberg, and that it's yet another German. That's something that I'm uneasy with, because it's important to me that as an American club we help the American game. The national team needs some help. I would love to contribute some players to the next Gold Cup or 2 or 3. It's nice that we've contributed Gioacchini, pushing him on to something better for sure. I'm really, really happy about that. And I'm really excited about the prospects of Totland getting into the Gold Cup in the next year or 2. But I just wanted to kind of mention, as disappointed as I might be that we might be getting more and more internationals in at City, I am excited about Horn. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer there.
And it is a loan, so this is a extended trial period, and I think that gives some of that flexibility and takes the load off of a guy like Jay Reed. He's coming in, 22 years old, first real MLS experience. He played for like a minute for New York Red Bulls last year, but I mean, this is a guy that you can bring along, and you expect him to probably be your left back of the future still. I don't think that should or will change. He just signed a homegrown contract that doesn't really kick in. I mean, it lasts for a few years, right? So he's long-term, Jay Reed is. So I wouldn't think too much about the harm this is going to do to his development or expectations for him. What I think this is going to hurt is Anthony Marcanic for St. Louis City. I don't necessarily see a whole lot of opportunity unless we really change up how our shape looks and our formations. And even then, I just see so many better options at a wing back position than Anthony Marcanic, for instance, or even at left center back. So I think it was already rough going for him in the depth chart after Kyle Hebert came back and was getting some time at left back over him, and you had Jay Reed already. This, I think, furthers that. And so you saw Anthony Marcanic play for City 2. I think that's kind of where he's going, and it'll be interesting to track how much, if anything, St. Louis gets from him, because his contract also expires at the end of this year. Anthony Marcanic does. He has an option for next year. Personally, if I was a betting man, I don't see us picking that up based on these moves right now.
Well said. And Marcanic played for City 2 on Friday. I'm sorry if you just said that, but I was there. It was a fun game, so I thought I'd throw it in there. Anything else on Horn before we move on?
No, I'm excited for him. Like I said, I don't have any inside info on this one, but I don't think that he's in town. And if that is incorrect, then I will correct myself on social media. But the press release said that he was on loan pending his ITC and visa. So even in the press release that they put out, they had that. And I think it's telling too that as of the day we're recording this, we had Henry Kessler. The move was made for him afterwards, and he's already got his number assigned. He's already taken the pictures and promo stuff. So I think we have a little bit of weight on Giannis Horn. I don't know if he's going to be a guy ready to go on the other side of the Leagues Cup break, but he will be somebody that we rely upon at some point during this stretch run for MLS.
Good stuff, Matt. Thank you so much for bringing that up and mentioning that, we're just seeing the beginning of Reed. I thought that was very well said. Let's move on. This is something that I think we could have put at the top of the episode, because I think with everything that's been going on, that injuries kind of haven't been talked about quite as much in the last week or two, and some really big stuff has been happening. Matt, I think everyone's a little desperate for this injury update we're about to go into, and it starts with Roman Berkey.
The bad right there is Roman Berkey was held out of the FC Juarez match this past weekend due to back issues. Hackworth saying it was his back. It was giving him some trouble, and so they held him out. This was probably the perfect game to hold him out. And I very much will talk about Juarez a bit, but I basically saw that game as the opportunity to rest some players. It was meaningless, even in a meaningless-ish tournament from our perspective, obviously. But you had a game that we didn't need to win that game in order to progress in the tournament. We didn't need to win that game to have a home game for the next match. The only thing that mattered is Portland or Colorado. And I don't honestly care which team we play. We've fared pretty poorly against both. We've had success against both on various levels. So I saw this was the good opportunity to keep him out, especially if he has any semblance of pain. He had back spasms a few weeks ago. So this worries me a little bit in that it's starting to become one of those trends where he may just need some extended downtime for a bit. And whether that occurs if we go out of this tournament, whether it occurs because they just need to shut him down for a little bit, I don't know. Because he was held out of this game specifically for his back, they didn't say spasms. They just said it was his back. That gives me a little worry that this could be a lingering thing. And so I just have to hope that our physio team and our medical staff can get him right. And if he needs to take a break for the next couple of weeks to get his back right for that stretch run in the season, that should be something you look at. Berkey is under contract for next year, so he's still your goalkeeper in the near term, the medium term future. You can't go without him for an extended period of time.
He was very vocal, and he doesn't come across to me as a complainer. So I think this was a big deal last year. He was very vocal that this MLS season is long and there are no breaks.
Yes.
Leagues Cup being a big part of that. So, you guys know me. I'm a little biased in this regard. If we were to rest Berkey for the rest of Leagues Cup, that is absolutely fine with me. We had we're going to talk about this a bit, highly rotated lineup in the last game. And I was happy to see it. I was very glad to see that, the new players were in there. But if Roman is feeling a little off, I love that Hackworth rested him. And please, let's stop with the Lund hate, because I mean, he had a great game, all things considered.
FOTMOB player of the match. I mean, he had 7 saves. He had some really good looking saves. And the goal that was scored against him, I would not credit that as his fault, honestly. He had the angle. It was a little bit of a deflection, but it was also gone through traffic. So he wasn't expecting the defenders to have the ball go essentially through 2 or 3 of their legs. Lunt had good positioning. He had himself a good game. And I told Santi before that FC Juarez game that if this is a game that Berkey sits or if Lunt gets time, then I think this is either his last chance or his last chance might have sailed, because his contract is also up. He hasn't performed well, and you need to start succession planning, looking to the future. And I know they like Ben Lunt. I like Ben Lunt. He's shown well in City too, but he's had some really rough goes by circumstances and otherwise. So this was a really good game for him to go out there and earn the draw, really allow City to stay in it in what was otherwise a fairly stagnated offensive performance. And I think this gives you a little confidence that if you do need to rest Berkey for a couple of games here, if he's not able to go against Portland, then I think I have no doubt that the fan base will ride Ben Lunt just as they have most times that he started, but give the guy a chance. He showed showed real quality against FC Juarez in a match where they had over 20 shots, in a match where they dominated possession, and he stood firm. He was there navigating that back line of Yarrow and Hebert. So this was very much secondary everything. And they kept Juarez off the board with that number of shots. I was impressed by Ben Luntz. I don't want to oversell his performance against what is otherwise a fairly subpar Juarez team.
Fair.
But you have to look for the positives in this kind of scenario. If you're looking at a potential, even a 5% chance that Berkey might not play because of the lingering back issues, because he did return to training, he played after the back spasms, and then he was held out here. So even if he plays against Portland, that's not to say this won't crop up again in the next few weeks. And I'm behind Ben Lunt at this point. I liked what I saw enough to say this is what he can build upon.
Me too. And his distribution has always looked good. Now he has had, one little Zach Steffen kind of bad pass in a lot of those former games, but the guy doesn't play regularly. That's something I can look past maybe one. If he gets regular minutes and he keeps up the good distribution that he had against Juarez, good for him. I think he's a great goalkeeper. And if he wants to stay here and he continues to play like he did against Juarez, let's keep giving him a chance. If that's the decision, I'd be good with it, is I guess all I'm saying.
Yeah, and the difference, I think, between last year and this year's Leagues Cup is our position in the table last year in MLS really made the team, I think, not care as much about Leagues Cup.
Yeah,
and so, the rosters, they were blown out against Club America. The roster against Columbus Crew last year was secondary players, basically. It was a rotated lineup again. This year is a completely different focus on Leagues Cup, and that's why I think Berkey in the first match made sense. And why I would say they might look to push him a little more, because I do think the club, regardless of everything else going on in the climate and the conversation around this tournament, the club is valuing this to a huge extent. And I think that would make them deal with this and potentially with Berkey's availability a little bit differently than just viewing this as a month-long break for him.
I do apologize for the rabbit trail, but it was a fun one. Let's continue with these injury updates. Joachim Nilsson is still out. I was pretty annoyed that he even played in Seattle on turf. I don't think I've gotten to say that. I thought that was pretty silly, and it was proved to be a bad idea. He's still out, but, it sounded like he's not out like another
No.
Sorry. It doesn't sound like he's out like it's another hamstring injury. It sounds like it was just aggravated.
Re-aggravated, yes. Absolutely. And I think that the re-aggravation put him at a slightly different timeline than Klaus and Alm. So that's the good news, Phil, is that it's not some new hamstring issue. And the last time Hackworth referenced Joachim Nilsson, he said that Nilsson was on about a week-long delay from Klaus and Alm. So if you're looking at who can return earlier, I'd put it at Alm, then Klaus, then Nilsson. But at least as of last week, Hackworth was very clear that it's not some extended absence that they're expecting for Joachim Nilsson, which does bring into account when are we going to see Rasmus Alm, right? When are the timelines for these other players? And Rasmus Alm, I think, is probably right along the horizon of starting to train with the team, getting the match day minutes coming up, and no date on when he's going to return, but he had an original 6 to 8 week timeline put on him after that MCL sprain sustained against Miami on June 1st. He's past that 8 weeks. He's doing lateral moves. He's doing all the movements individually, running straight line, lateral. So he's now kind of ready to progress to joining the team. Klaus is right behind him. He was solo running running laps last week. So he's a week or so behind, and then Nilsson on the other side of that. So the optimistic look for me is Alm would be ready to go against Portland for MLS play, not this week, but Alm would be ready to go then, getting a couple of weeks to go with the team to train. And then I think Klaus past that. So looking at the lineup that we had against Juarez, looking at the lineup that we're probably going to have in the attack, I think Simon Betcher is going to be asked to play a large part with Klaus still not being able to go until the other side, probably a game or two after Leagues Cup, if I were to have to guess. But the good news is we do have a lot more depth in the attack. And I think with Alm, Klaus, and Nilsson unavailable still, this depth that Hackworth or depth that Lutz has brought in is really going to be called upon. And I think that you're starting to see some different formations used, like we had Nerwinski along with Yarrow and Hebert this past week. And I think what that allows us to do is toy and tinker with 3 at the back, pushing up a wing back, Maybe you have the opposite scenario where you have Totland comes back in and he can push in the attack along with Betcher, Hartle, Twickert, and Indiana Vassilev. I think that's what I look for, and you're getting some quality to go on with that depth, and you're getting a little bit more cohesiveness. So as far as injuries go, I think it's this month-long Leagues Cup break is doing what it needs to do for MLS play. It provides the opportunity while some dedicated time, because you're not having to manage the minutes yet of Alm and Klaus in with these other attackers. You can let them go a little bit more free. You can work their stamina up, their progression from 40 to 60 to 80 to 100% on guys like Twykert and Hartle. And that's really necessary. I think that's going to be the most important thing, is by the time we end this Leagues Cup tournament, at whatever point it ends, I want these players to be 100% ready to go. And then you have Alm and Klaus joining them at that time, so that you're having scenarios where 60, 70 minutes into the game, you're now having that quality that doesn't drop off between Twykert and Hartle, Indy, Betcher, to Klaus, Alm, and then even Kajima coming in as well. Kajima and Climb. So there's a lot to like about what we're progressing towards. And ultimately, Phil, outside of Roman Berkey, the big takeaway after all that is no new injuries. That's the most exciting thing to me, is that we're, over the course of the past few weeks, knock on wood, but we're turning a corner in the recoveries, but we're not adding anybody else to the injured list.
I'll take it. And let's keep it going for as long as possible. I think we have one more topic to touch on before
go
ahead. Well, I mean, this is kind of your big moment in a way, because
oh my gosh,
it's very sad. We've lost Tim Ream to Charlotte, I would say.
That's a good way to put it. That's Tim Ream has become the latest casualty in the St. Louis Charlotte battle. I would say that. Unfortunately, Tim Ream is joining MLS, and it is with Charlotte FC. Charlotte FC announced this week that they acquired Tim Ream, who he had signed a new contract with Fulham, but they let him go. I know they had depth chart, and they were all those things with Fulham, but Charlotte apparently had his discovery rights, signed a contract through 2026 with an option for 27. So he will be playing for Charlotte until he's probably 45 years old, it sounds like, at this point. And the thing that killed me about this was in the presenting graphic on social media, they called out St. Louis, Missouri in that graphic, welcoming him to Charlotte. It was salt in the wound, insult to injury. And I could have gone the rest of my life without as many Charlotte fans in my mentions as I ended up with this week.
And it's been showing up in multiple places. I had to pull it up to make sure I got it right. STL Soccer Tracker, of course, our friend, is official. He put, it's official. Tim Ream signs with Matt Baker, STL's Charlotte FC. On Reddit, is it Brian found this? It said, my second choice was going to be Tim Ream signs with Charlotte FC. He joins fellow St. Louis and Matt Baker, who lives rent-free in their head.
That was good. Yeah.
That was really good. Yeah, this is, maybe Matt, is this your worst nightmare? Of all the places Tim Ream could go, it's Charlotte, unfortunately. But
this was a DEFCON 5 type of thing. This was of all the possible teams, even including SKC. I think this one that might have hurt. I don't know. That one probably would have been worse for the entire fan base. But this one just bothers me on like a visceral level. And if you don't know why this bothers me so much, I've got a lot of history that dates back to before City even kicked off back in Charlotte's inaugural season. I gave them so much flack for tearing up their grass field and installing turf, to their coach saying that their players were screwed because of the roster that they had. I mean, there was just so many things that they did wrong that I called them out on. We even had a battle with the app. There was an app discussion that happened for a while. I made fun of their app that really got to them. And so it's just one of those like internet fight things that really doesn't mean anything, but it's bothers me that Charlotte got Tim Ream. And I honestly don't, like, if I were to take off my fanboy hat, take off my St. Louisan hat, and just say, would Tim Ream have been a good fit in St. Louis? I would say yes. Like, honestly, the form that Tim Ream is in right now, all things considered, age be damned, honestly. Like, he's a good high-level center back right now. Ben Wright, our friend Ben Wright from Backheeled, and he has this chart that he lists, and he classifies players based off of like serviceable, high-end MLS, elite talent, and he had Tim Ream as the only elite talent that Charlotte has on their team. That's still the quality of player he has, and so it was just frustrating that we couldn't find a way to bring him to St. Louis. And I have no doubt, I have zero doubt in my mind that Lutz tried, right? That's his MO, to bring these kinds of players. He has Josh Sargent on his discovery rights list as compensation for the allocation order being taken away and us losing the first pick there. So we have Josh Sargent's rights. They took that by choice. And I have no doubt that they at least inquired. They tried to bring Tim Ream, whether that'll ever be official or not. I'm no doubt in my mind that the conversations occurred internally and they tried to do something. But when discovery rights are at play, we already had to pay Columbus $350,000 for one person's discovery rights. That's a lot of money. That's record-breaking discovery rights payments. Charlotte would have held us hostage for that. There's no way they would have let us get his rights for probably less than $500 to $1 million. An absurd amount.
Yep. And where I thought you were going to go there is Lutz probably tried. I think he might have. I don't know. Honestly, I don't care because it just wasn't feasible. It didn't make sense. And, looking at having Nilsson out, if we were to get someone very similar to him, even on a higher level, and have him go out because of his age, that would be just catastrophic, especially for the price it would have to be paid for Ream. And that's another worry even for Charlotte, is that it's turf. You know what I mean? And
shocking.
Ream's on borrowed time in some ways, or maybe he's just like a specimen of a human being. But putting him on a turf field half of the season isn't the best idea. And as a national team fan, I'm actually sad to see him leave the Premier League, because I think he could have gone one more season being the de facto number 3 center back at Fulham, a good normal, a good level replacement if someone were to go down that they could have faith in. I'm sad Fulham got rid of him. I'm sad that Ream isn't going to have Premier League minutes on his card when it comes time for the national team to call him in, because honestly they still need him. It's not ideal, but he's still needed on the national team level. So a lot of sadness there. It'll be cool to have him nearby, and I think we play Charlotte, correct?
Not this year.
Oh, okay. So maybe next year we'll get Tim Ream in St. Louis, or us going to St. Louis and having a nice jersey exchange of some sort, something special, hopefully planned for that, and maybe even have him around in the summer. Who knows? Tim Ream's a little closer to home. That's what we'll take out of this, the good. You're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. We have one more section here to talk about some Juarez, some of the Juarez game, and we can talk a little bit about the game coming up on Friday. Matt, where do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, with the Juarez game this past week, I don't know that there's really a whole lot to dive into other than we let them take the ball the entire game, and we really changed up what our models seemed to be. We were playing counterattacking. We didn't high press. We had one of the lowest average height of defensive actions of the entire season, at least 10 meters lower, closer to our goal. We were engaging Juarez compared to when we usually do. So this was a very surprising game as it played out. But I think that speaks to what Hack said post-game, and that they were expecting a little bit of a different shape, at least defensively, from Juarez, saying they deployed Jonathan Gonzalez in different ways and moving him from the back four into the midfield. And so they adjusted out of a 3-5-2 and they ended up playing different. And so you have, I think tactically it was surprising to St. Louis, and they never really seemed like they were on the offensive for too many moments. And the takeaway stat for me from Juarez was that Simon Betcher, Cedric Toykert, and Indiana Vasilev, 3 of our 4 attackers, all had less than 30 touches each. That was pretty abysmal in how little we were getting the ball into the feet and the possession of our most dangerous players consistently. And the fact that our expected goals was a pretty poor 1.31, I think, really highlighted that. So I was frustrated with how that game played out, but we talked about the work that Ben Lunt, Hebert, and Yarrow did on the back line. Felt that defensively it was a very strong performance. We withstood like 23 shots, I think, but we just didn't have the connection. And that was the frustrating thing to me, and something I look for different going into Portland is how can we better connect our lines? How can we make Edu Leuven much more of an impact throughout the game? And does it start with Chris Durkin? Does it start with the center backs? And does it start with the distribution from the keeper? Because that probably plays into it with how often Roman Berkey is actually responsible for the distribution and beginning all of our offensive sequences. Not just turning the ball over high, but when Roman Berkey has the ball, he told me directly that his vision for when he has the ball at his feet is he looks as high as possible to start, and he brings the vision back. That's why if you watch when Roman Berkey has the ball at his feet, he'll look long, he'll look for Klaus, Betcher, whoever's up top, and then he'll slowly come back between the lines. Not slowly, very quickly, but he'll come back towards the back line. And so if he ever dumps the ball off to a center back, that's his last option, and he sees absolutely no possibility for sending the ball. And so Ben Lunt doesn't really have that skill, that awareness, and the quality in his touch. So maybe that's something that they just didn't go with as much. And that speaks to the impact that Roman Berkey can have on the offense. So takeaway from Juarez is I didn't see it. Takeaway, what I want to see going into Portland is if Berkey's in, I look for much better connectedness and much better high lines to be held, and for just the ball to be better played in our attacking half. I think if you don't want to possess the ball in the attacking half, that's fine. We don't need to. We can still have the quality touches, but you're still getting that gelling of Hartle and Teukert in the half spaces, trying to find each other, really trying to figure out where each other best plays, because you're running Hartle out on the wing now. I think that's something that is fascinating to watch, is Hartle out on the wing coming into the channel area on the left side, where you're having Cedric Teukert be a true second striker underneath. In the press, he presses up centrally, and in offense, you're seeing him underneath Betcher as he's holding the line. So it's a conceptually a really strong idea with high quality players compared to what you've had the past few months. I just need to see better connectedness, and I need to see a more consistent chance creation from that group. But it also starts so further back. And so, there's a lot that goes into this, and we don't have a whole lot of time to talk about it all, but I just look for better cohesion, I guess, ultimately.
Yeah, and you just got to remember that things are still developing. And so while I want to, Matt, when you first said the 32 meters from the back line is where we confronted the line of, what is it called? I'm so sorry.
The average height of defensive actions.
Thank you. That's really far low, and I was freaking out. But then the thought is, the first thought was that, boy, this is like old school Hackworth before he came to St. Louis City. That's like totally fine for him. And so my first thought was, is Hackworth reverting to his old self? Is this what we're dealing with in the future? Surely Lutz isn't okay with that. But Matt, you also mentioned maybe that was part of the changing of, responding to what Juarez did. And, that's totally fine. If that's an in-game adjustment and it was extreme, that's fine. If it's the team, if it's Lunt, maybe not distributing, that's interesting, because I liked his distribution, but that's a really good point that we need to watch both of those things. Mainly, though, I think Hackworth's number one job after we kind of get things solidified, figure out how to kind of go about this business and what formation and how to play, maybe get the pressing a little bit better, make sure we don't get 23 shots on goal or 23 shots in a game, however that is, whatever reason that is. Again, we don't have time to go into that. We got to get Hartle and Teukert the ball more. That is like, now that we have those super players up top, yes, Leuven gets lots of touches in a game typically. Now it needs to be Leuven and Hartle getting the ball like crazy. That's what every team who has a special 10 up high, make sure they get that guy the ball. Every team in MLS that has that super player, like, that is the number one goal. So that's something that I would love to see. And, maybe even as early as 2 games from now, it needs to be pretty high comparatively.
And that's why going into Portland, I'm going to be watching the midfield most closely. I'm going to be watching the wings are going to be interesting, because it's going to be a vastly different look than what we had against Juarez. It's not going to be Jake Nerwinski, and it's not going to be him on the right side and Akil Watts on the left. It's going to be something different. Thomas Totten's going to be back in the game, and so I'm going to be looking to the midfield. I know what we're going to see from Totland. I can expect what we're going to see on the left, but the midfield and your connection between Leuven and Hartle. Leuven did have a lot of good passes into the final third. I think he had 7 passes that were into the final third against Juarez. So I want him to be freed up a little bit. When you have Chris Durkin there patrolling the defensive midfield, I think that unlocks Edu Leuven to really play that box to box and find Hartle, find Toyhert, and be able to connect some of these runs. That's what I see a whole lot of opportunity for, because Edu Leuven, for all intents and purposes, should be another attacker. You should be able to get that quality volume with Leuven, Hartle, Toyhert, Vasilev, and Betcher all in the attacking third much more consistently than what we've been doing. And if you can get Leuven to at the very least, pass between the lines and connect to our attackers in transition, because he has the quality for the touch, he does. Yeah. I think that's where your money's going to be made. And so not just sending it long from the keeper, not just working the wings and sending crosses in, but you can really unlock your midfield to a level that you've never been able to before, even dating back to last season. Because Leuven, it starts with Leuven, yeah. But the quality you just mentioned with Hartle and even what Toyhert can be doing playing off of Simon Betcher, like these are skilled players at a much higher quality than we had access to earlier this year. They can make the moves and make the plays to receive the ball and then play off of it quickly. That's what I want to see going into for Portland. And I really hope that we see that, because this is a strong Portland team. They've come off their previous couple of games with a 6-1 aggregate. They haven't lost since MLS play finished up against LA Galaxy. They've been climbing the standings. They've got Evander, probably the best, if not one of the top 3 10s in the league, right next to Lucho Acosta. He's got double-digit goals and assists. I mean, this is a dangerous team that St. Louis is going to be playing, but they've got the quality. St. Louis has so much quality compared to what they did, and now we're in game 3 for Hartle and Betcher, or for Hartle and Toyhert playing with each other. And so you're getting more of that quality time. You're getting more familiarity in practice. You're applying it for more often. This is the progression. I didn't see a lot of it against Juarez, and I see a huge opportunity for it against the Timbers.
But when it did happen, the quality's there, and I think we've not seen it's kind of repeating it, but I don't think we've seen this quality of final third play in City without it being a high press turnover at all. I mean, that early ball from Leuven to Toyhert in that game is something. It kept kind of happening through the game, but that first one was so good. It was beautiful play. And, if we get Leuven with time and space, or Hartle or Toyhert with time and space, Simon Betcher is going to play a big role in that. Can we get Vasilev into that a little bit more in the next game? Can we just keep that happening more often rather than just a few touches in a game? That's going to be massive. Matt, do you have one last thing? We got time for one more quick thing before we go.
One more quick thing we have to touch on it, and it's the thing we mentioned earlier. We'll have one last topic, because I don't want to end on this. Jabulu Blom. Really quickly, there was it's unknown entirely exactly what happened at the end of the FC Juarez game, but cameras caught after regulation ended. The players were starting to huddle near the touchline. Jabulu Blom was seen sitting on the bench. He wasn't huddling with the team. The next time the cameras panned over there, the team was arm in arm, getting ready to support their players, going to take the PKs after Juarez. That's when cameras caught an interaction between Coach Hackworth and Blom, where Blom was still on the bench. Hackworth came back. Blom stood up. They had some conversation, and then it seemed like Blom went either back to his seat, the locker room. I don't know, but he didn't look like he joined his team. That is concerning when you have that type of a player who has fallen down the depth chart. He's obviously lost his position to Chris Durkin for a period of time now, and his own contract is up in and of itself. And so you're looking at what options could be available for him. Is he in the right mindset? Did he have a close relationship with Bradley Carnell that he didn't like what happened with him? That's all speculation. But the facts of what the cameras caught and what his interactions were with the team is highly concerning. And that's a depth piece that we need right now, because say what you want about the quality of Blom compared to Durkin, I still think Blom is a fantastic sweeper. I think he plays that center defensive mid spot well at times. He's very much not an offensive player, and he can provide depth at a right back position too, which he played before transitioning to center defensive mid. So if you need a 3 center back look, he can help you out there. He's defensively strong. We've seen more than flashes of brilliance from Jabulu Blom. It's just very concerning what we're seeing now from, I would say, an off the field perspective at the sideline. That's not something that I hope continues if he's going to remain a player for St. Louis City for the rest of the season. And we need him in that role, even though we have a guy like Jake Girdwood Reich, who at this point also seems to be usurping him in that center defensive mid sub role.
Something to watch, with Carnell. man management was a problem eventually to some degree. We don't know what degree, but I think it would be silly to say that it didn't exist. And so how does Hackworth deal with this situation that was very public and very obvious? So, I'm interested to see Hackworth. He's a grizzled veteran. He's an older guy. He seems more level-headed and laid back. So it could go better. It could be that Blom disappears.
Either way, St. Louis has a unique chance ahead of them. I know that the conversations have been swirling all over social media about the atmosphere that's going to be Friday night at City Park against the Portland Timbers. St. Louis does have a chance to make history a little bit. First opportunity to progress. They could progress for the first time to a round of 16 in a knockout tournament. They are currently in the round of 32 in this Leagues Cup tournament, which matches the furthest they got in the U.S. Open Cup last year, reaching the round of 32 after defeating Union Omaha. So there is a potential that they could make the furthest move in a knockout tournament if they win this game. That's an exciting proposition, and I would look for Hack to be deploying as many of his tools as possible given health. But cohesion. I just want to see progress made for this attack and the lines connecting. As long as I see progress, I'll be happy no matter the result.
Good stuff, Matt. Thanks for covering all of that stuff today. We're Flyover Footy. Thank you for joining us and listening. We're on the Big 550 KTRS, and we are presented by Noble Ice Vineyards. Whatever you're doing on Friday, enjoy the game. Enjoy watching the game, going to the game. Enjoy boycotting the game in whatever way you do, if that's what you want to do. We thank you for listening to us through this difficult time. Please, we support City massively. We care a lot. And so however you see fit, please do that and stick with us through the Leagues Cup. And we're going to be going full out when it's over, full format, nice, long, crazy shows from the from that point on. So stick with us. Again, thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Okay. I was trying to hit end recording, but I had to close all my stuff to get this fixed.
Thanks for joining us, chat. Appreciate you.
No massive edits? You covered for me while I was gone?
I somehow just kept talking.
Thanks, dude. I'm really sorry. I'll start doing a restart before we go.
I don't think there's any massive edits. I'll tell you that.
Did you see it muted me again in the middle of that last little bit there? Yeah. That's why I paused forever.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll edit this one and I'll do my best. Did my sound get better at the end or no?
No, not for me. It
sounds really thin.
It sounds thin. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I was thinking it sounds like you don't have bass or a deep tone like you usually do. Okay. So use your recording, I would say, as long as we both sound good on that.
Yeah, well, I had to stop, so I'll just do my best to EQ it and put in my recording as much as I can.
Okay. I'm excited to hear what it sounds like when it comes out tomorrow.
Pressure's on. I talk a big game, don't I? Now I got to deliver.
Oh, I'm excited. You're going to do great. It's fine.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Sorry for the late start.
No, dude, you're good. It was a fun conversation. And gosh, I hope this team continues to improve. That's all I can say. It was a low point about a month ago.
Pretty bad. It's okay, though. I mean, I love the hell out of this team.
Dude,
they could suck for 10 years.
I don't even think we specified. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's support, win, lose, or draw, for sure. But I don't think we actually said the number. 6 transfers in one window?
That's a lot, dude.
That's a lot. That is insane if you think about it. And not just 6 transfers, but I mean, we were basically running a City 2 team for a few weeks there.
I was going to say, didn't we have 7 or 8 players out at the peak?
Yeah. And when we were having all those short-term loans and burning through those and signing 3 players from City 2, I mean,
it's a team and a third of turnover and being injured.
Yeah.
Or a starting 11 plus several subs, basically.
And these injuries were actual, like, it's not depth injuries. Like, these were starters that were out for us. And so I would never have been able to pick the types of, this might be a fun conversation next week. I would never have been able to pick the specific players that left, and definitely not that we brought in. Like, I didn't have Tim Parker on my bingo card, no matter what is. I thought that they would have let contract negotiations progress, but it really sounds like Parker held a firm line of, I'm not taking a hometown discount type of thing. Which, I mean, he's an athlete. Like, he's got a family. I'm not gonna. And these aren't massive salaries. We're not talking about going from 40 million to 20 million. Like, there's not a part of me that will look down upon him for trying to get as much as he's worth as possible.
Yep, before it's over.
Because he's worth it.
Yep.
Yeah. But it is. I look forward to the in September, I think. Because I think we're actually still live and streaming, so I think people are still watching us. I look forward in September or so when the MLSPA announces the salary guide, because that'll let us see like how much is Hartle making. I am so interested in how much Marcel Hartle is actually making. We know he came for a free, but if he's a designated player, like how much did Lutz actually splash on this dude? I've heard rumors of the approvals that it had to go through, but I am extremely excited to see how much we're actually paying for Hartle. That could change a lot of perceptions in the fan base for the better, and buy Lutz some goodwill in the fan base going forward of saying, okay, they're willing to do it now. Because when I talked to Jeremiah Oshan, he made the comment that $6 to $7 million is about standard for what teams are paying for DPs. And I'm not expecting Hartle to be in that range, but even if he's in the $3 million range, that's double what our most expensive player is making now. I don't know. Just things I think about random times.
Yeah. And I think a lot about the other thing you said, which is jumping through hoops to get the money. What did that take?
I mean, you have two layers that he's got to go through, right? You've got Diego and then you've got the ownership. So you wonder how often, this is just me thinking out loud, you wonder how often ownership has to be engaged on player acquisitions. Wouldn't think this would go past Diego by and large for a lot of these things, but
well, if it's only money, like there's a multiverse where
if it's only money,
if money's the only thing saying no, right? There's a multiverse where Lutz has been asking for money since the beginning and hasn't been getting it, and it took this level of failure for him to convince them that they're wrong, right?
I think that has a lot of merit to it. When you're playing well and you're exceeding all expectations and you're doing it on a shoestring budget, then why not keep it going? What's the need to rock the boat? We don't need to bring in expensive players because you're doing it with the lowest salary in the league. And then suddenly reality sets in and you don't want to, but at the same time, reality sets in and you do make that quick adjustment. So this isn't just credit to Lutz for the investment. This is credit to the ownership group for understanding that this happening this year isn't the aberration. It's last year that's probably the aberration. And this year could be a sign of how things would be going. Unless you splash some cash and make some quick pivots that did include Bradley Carnell. So I don't know. There's a lot.
And they only pulled the trigger 6 months too late. Could have been worse. Could have been.
If you're talking about transfer windows, you could argue that they only missed one transfer window of meaningful action, and it hurts in the short term, but only one miss could be a lot worse.
Heck yeah. Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Good times, buddy.
Yeah, always.